Meanwhile, Ukraine is battling with a shortage of soldiers and military aid as its war on Russia or with Russia drags on. Commanders say their army is exhausted, wounded and too small to continue the 2-year-long conflict. Let's get you some analysis on the situation there. International relations expert Professor Agnieszka Legucka joins us now for more. She's a senior research fellow on Russia at the Polish Institute of International Affairs. Prof, it's great to have you with us on the show. Thank you for joining us here in Johannesburg. And it's absolutely understandable that there is now this shortage of soldiers, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. Thank you for the invitation. And I just rapidly heard what you were talking about the war, anniversary of full-scale war in Ukraine. So, yeah, as a neighbor Poland country, we look on this problem, security issue, very closely, and we try to support Ukraine as well.
When we think back to Russia's invasion of Ukraine now 2 years ago, and we take a look at specifically the rate at which Ukrainian men rush to recruitment centers, that picture has completely changed now.
I mean, both countries have some problems with recruitment because Ukraine has actually sent a lot of soldiers who are dying on the front line, and this recruitment can be difficult for the Ukrainian authorities to provide the mass recruitment because people are quite nervous about this situation, and on the front line, the situation in this year, next year, will worsen definitely. So that's why it is very important to have new recruitment from Ukrainian side. When it comes to Russia, there are also kind of political limitation about having like conscript soldiers putting on the front, because at this point it's like a political moment, because in 1 month almost we will have in Russia the presidential so-called elections and presidential elections in Russia, and also Putin do not want to send new soldiers as a mobilization wave, which is supposed to happen. I mean, probably he will do that after the elections.
Yeah, the difference, I suppose, is that, as you say, Putin, and he'll probably have to wait until after the elections, yeah. But he has shown a willingness to force men to the front if not enough of them volunteer, right? While Ukraine is trying to find a balance between, yes, coercion, but more persuasion.
I mean, Ukrainians are fighting. It is an existential war for them. So more people have a willingness to fight, to volunteer. But this is not enough, because we understand, and also Ukrainians understand, that from this perspective, how Russia is behaving itself and how Russia is trying to not only leave Ukraine, but also have a confrontation with the West. That's why that kind of push from the Ukrainian authorities to hold the line when on the occupied territories is very important. That's why Ukrainian authorities need to have more and more soldiers on the ground.
Right. I mean, essentially, you know, these governments are trying to convince men to put their lives on the line. They're trying to convince these people to sacrifice themselves.
But many Ukrainians understand why they are fighting for, because they are fighting for their families, their children, their whole country. Because otherwise, the different option, the alternative, is massive killing from the Russian soldiers and from the Russian state as such. Because we could observe it as a massive graves where Russia was occupying part of the territories around Kiev, in Bucha or Irpin. After that, when Ukrainian took over that territories, we could see the massive graves of civilians. So that's why it is so crucial. And I think that the willingness for fighting is still on in Ukraine on the high level, but at the same time, we can observe also fatigue of the war, not only in Ukraine, but also on the Western countries, which are quite not supportive in the way to be very fast to give, for example, Ukrainian the artillery weapon enough to hold the line, which is crucial when we want to have limited option of dying on the ground. That's why it is so important for the West to provide its military assistance.
So what happens if indeed we can't convince these people to enlist? You know, on the one hand, Russia's population is what, more than 3 times as large as Ukraine's population? What's the next step here if we can't get people to enlist?
I mean, probably this will be the same thing as it was at the beginning of the war, the obligatory taking those soldiers to army, to have the massive conscript and first train those people, but it's also very important. Russians do not do that at the stage. That's why their army was weak for the first year, because they didn't have an opportunity to educate, to give some exercises for the soldiers. Ukrainians are doing that with the Western support, and we as a West, countries from the NATO, we are also helping Ukraine to exercise soldiers in our countries, and then they are sending back to Ukraine. So I think that the Ukrainian authorities, answering directly to your question, they will force men in Ukraine to go on the front line.
Wow. But there has already been, it's obviously an unpopular move. Lawmakers, they're treading very carefully. There have been over 1,000 amendments to draft legislation around this, right? Around forcing men to go to the front lines.
Yeah, if Russians are doing what they are actually started to do to strengthen their position on the occupied territories, it would be necessary to do, actually. There will be no other option to force men to go to the front line. At the same time, we need to understand that in this perspective, more and more people would like to escape from Ukraine. And also there were some ideas from the authorities that other countries, for example, Poland, should somehow resend those people. Catch those men who actually had flew from Ukraine during these 2 years, that they're supposed to come back by force, which is very difficult to provide from different countries, Western or others, where Ukrainians are still there, Ukrainian men are still there. So I think it won't work in that case. So they will concentrate, Ukrainian authorities probably will concentrate only on the men who are in Ukraine at the moment.
Yeah, and in the midst of this, bribery is taking place because, people don't want to enlist. People are trying to raise money to try and flee the country. It's going to be interesting to see how the coming weeks and months do unfold, given this almost impasse, especially that Ukraine is facing.
The most important even not are the soldiers. The corruption is everywhere when you want to somehow not to be involved to being sent on the front line. So it's kind of, I think still Ukrainians are on the quite good level when it comes to people who are still want to fight. But nevertheless, that situation are happening in any other countries. But nevertheless, the most important thing is to send Ukrainians weapons, because without it, even if they will have more soldiers, the more soldiers will die on the front line. That's why it is so important for the West and for the whole community, Western and other communities, to help Ukraine with ammunition, because this is something which is very lack on the ground, and that would be crucial to even limit the level of conscript soldiers to stand on the front line. Ukraine need weapons, and it's very important and crucial at this stage of war.
And are we seeing that happening, especially given the death of Alexei Navalny?
I think that I know that it can sound strange, but symbol of death of Navalny can be very important element in pushing Congress, for example, to send money for Ukraine to help that in that sense, because this is final role when you have authoritarian leader who is ready to kill Alexei Navalny as a prisoner, as his political adversary. So authoritarian systems usually like that if they are using violence inside the country, and it's very and you can compare it when it comes to their action outside of the country, because using force is something which strengthens the political system, the Putinism itself. So killing Alexei Navalny can exactly raise the moment that Putin is a brutal tyrant who is trying to preserve his power, even if he's using force inside or outside Russia.
Professor Agnieszka Legucka, thanks so much for your time, joining us from Warsaw, Poland. She's a senior research fellow on Russia at the Polish Institute of International Affairs. Ukraine battling a shortage of soldiers and of military aid as its war with Russia drags on now 2 years.